you know what I mean?
I remember even me, like, when I first started living around here, I was like, when we first moved here, we only had little man.
Yeah.
And I got here and it's like, bro, literally, everything is 15 minutes away. Nothing is around like, we went shopping one time, yeah? And we forgot something. We forgot, like, milk. We just forgot milk, bro. There was no, I'm going to nip out and get it, bro. Because literally, like, if I need to go to the shop, yeah, I need to account, I might get in traffic.
Yeah.
And I might
you
be
know
out
when you
for
got
an
kids as well, like, you got to put them all in the car, strap them all in, like, everything's a mission, so.
Honestly, bro, it's the thing is, and like, when I got out, I was like, this is long. Because originally we lived in London, like, my family.
Mm-hmm.
Then we moved to Huntingdon in, like, around about 2000. But we still sort of went back and forth to London. But I was so used to sort of convenience, because in London you could just nip out, get it done. So Huntingdon was one thing, but even then, still, like, there was still an element of you can nip out, because it's literally. But it's only. But then after we had both, like, our daughter as well, like, now literally our kids can just go play, and it's not. I ain't got to worry and thinking where they're gone with it. And for the most part, because the place is so small, and our kids are the only mixed race kids in the village. So do you know what I mean? So if they went somewhere, everybody would know, oh, that's their kids.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean? So
exactly.
It's one of the things where, like, for the children, it's the perfect setup. As an adult, I'm like, it's long. But to be fair, I've got used to it now. Like, I'm kind of accustomed to it.
Because I grew up in this environment.
Yeah. Oh, did you?
It was, yeah.
Right.
So my story's kind of a little bit backwards.
Well, this is the thing. I wanted to, like, because like I said, Aaron gave me, like, a little brief, a little brief background, and basically, like, I even wrote down my little questions I want to ask you. So, like,
Nice.
like, I want to get an overall picture, picture of your journey, because it's not like it's not the standard, and it's like and like, I also want to find out more about your show. I saw that on your Instagram, amazing. So I'm excited to hear about that. But first, like, I want to, like, on your Instagram, I saw these titles, and so it goes, if I've got it right, it goes father, mentor, actor, poet, barber. With the exception of the fatherhood, like, I'd like to know, like what came first in those titles? Was it like, did you, like, from a young age, did you stumble on one thing and it led you to another, or did you kind of dabble in all sorts? You had an interest in all things.
So I'm very much like my dad in that. I think that comes down, we'll get deeper into it, but
yeah,
I think when you have an identity issue, or an issue with identity and the connectedness to yourself and your surroundings, I think you tend to try and find that in doing lots of different types of things. Like, so my dad's just done so many jobs. He's never settled in a job,
really?
Like, constantly change.
Yeah.
And he's never found happiness in work either. So I kind of, my mum's a hairdresser.
Yeah.
So my mum's white, she's a hairdresser.
Mm-hmm.
So I was always like, she'd bring us in as, like, little kids, and we'd always be talking to all of her ladies, and, like, she always used to think, look, they'll learn how to talk to people through doing this. So I'm grateful for that. But then at school, it was just, everything was just football, football, as it usually is when you've got nothing to do around in
absolutely.
These areas. You just go and kick a ball around. You know what I mean?
There
was no sort of social media or anything back then, so just football. And then I started to realize that I was talented in kind of drama and stuff like that. So my teacher, it was mostly my drama teacher, was just like, oh, you've got such good stage presence, like, you need to do this. And I was just like, no, I was like, all right, like, she kind of convinced me. And then
what school did you go to?
I went to St. Ivo.
Oh, did you?
I went to the Ivo, I went to the Ivo. My teacher was just basically like, you need to do this, you need to do that. And I was just a bit like, I just took whatever the easiest route. Like, a lot of things came quite easy to me, so I just wanted to kind of do the minimum work and get the maximum output. I didn't end up choosing drama as a GCSE or anything like that.
No.
And then I think what happened is I ended up I didn't like one of the GCSEs that I chose, and then so I was like, I need to do something else, and she was like, don't worry, I'll sort it for you. so she patterned it, and basically I just switched up.
Oh, did you?
Did that. Yeah. So, like, who knows, if I would have stuck at it, I would have never gone down that path. Do you know what I mean? And to cut a long story short, again, ended up going to university, I did a drama degree, but I just wanted to be in London. Like that was kind of my,
uni
my
in
ticket
London,
out. So I went uni at Kingston. So Kingston University is kind of southwest, Surrey area. And yeah, that was my like first experience of just like full on black culture, like where it was just everything was encompassed in that. It was so different to what like going to school in the Ivo, do you know what I mean?
100%.
So although I had like family members and stuff like that, that kind of propelled me into like my whole friendship dynamic. My friendship group just changed, and suddenly I just like everyone around me was mixed race or black, and you know what I mean. And I was always really open about who I was and where I was from, and they was all chill about it. Do you know what I mean? I was just myself in that sense, and I studied a drama degree. I got an agent while I was at university.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
Because when they're like, how old are you?
I'm 31.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So like,
so I went to uni in 2010.
Right. Yeah.
I think it was 2009, 2010, something like that.
I'd say we're roughly in the similar sort of age group, and I can understand what you say when you mean like the shift between the culture when you went to London. Because I remember when me and my family, we came here in Huntington about, like I said, it was around about 2000. I remember when I think there was like 2 other black kids, and it was such, and again it was such a, and it was interesting because I think there was like slowly when we came, then slowly a few more black people came, but it was it was always like I don't know if you might have felt like this in St. Ives, but it was always like it's kind of like the elephant in the room, because like I said, it was everybody else was white, and there was no sort of black culture around it, and for the most part, I mean, on weekends we'd always go back to London, but at school it was always a case of, wow, there's a black kid. Do you know what I mean? So it was that like, did you, like when you was, before you sort of got to London, you sort of really like getting exposed to like black culture on that level, was you, it's a strange question, like I always say this, my children, they're mixed race, but I don't think they don't know that they're mixed race. They're just kids. Was you aware that you're mixed race, or was, for the most part, they didn't really? No. Was it only after you sort of got exposed to black culture?
So because my dad was adopted,
so
he was adopted. So he was born in Croydon Hospital or whatever. I got taken to a mother and baby home. So he was born in and around Croydon in them times, and then his basically adoptive parents, my grandparents, they were from St. Ives, so they just went into the city. Just like picked a kid that they could save, like, you know what I mean? Like they were strongly Christian, so I think, you know, it was very much like, you know, it was a lot of missionary work, and you know, I don't want to disrespect them in any way. They're both passed now. You know, they were great grandparents, but there was something about, you know, white people adopting kids of color that meant that they wanted to give them a better chance, or whatever it was that they saw. I'm not religious myself, but so they went into kind of London, which is very diverse. It's kind of where everyone is, and said, all right, we'll take him. All right, and then he brought him out, and that's where our history started. So on both sides of my family were white. Right, both on my sides of my family. The only exposure to black culture that I had was so my dad was adopted into a family that was already a family, so he had like older siblings and stuff, but they were all white as well. Right, okay. So my dad was adopted into that family, and one of his older sisters, she went and did some missionary work in Jamaica. Right, so she went out to Jamaica and she basically started to teach out there and everything like that. So she spent like 30 years in Jamaica, and she adopted 2 black children there as well, my cousins. So again, same sort of thing. You know, it was in the family. There's quite a lot of people that are adopted, and they're kind of, a lot of them are of color in my family, in that side of my family. So so they came over. Both my cousins. One of my cousins came over when he was like 13, 14. Yeah, and the other came over from when he was 15. 16, just to get him out of trouble and stuff, really, you know.
I know there's that story.
So they come over and kind of lived in my area for quite a while. Right. And I kind of really attached myself to them because it was, you know, it was identity. It was kind of something to hold on to massively.
And I think that's where, like, I was gonna like I wanted to ask you because like Aaron had mentioned something. He said like in terms of like your I guess like your background in terms of like with your dad's background in terms of like what country was like originally from. He mentioned that you didn't necessarily figure that out. Well, you didn't come to that until later on in life.
No, literally.
And I wanted to ask you because this is a thing where because of course. I mean, I'm from Uganda, and there's nothing Ugandan around here. So unless I make a point to teach my children this, then they're for the most part they're gonna know. And don't get me wrong, I think that like my mum and dad they live real far, and there's an element like I'm sure you find the same thing getting into fatherhood. Like the time just flies by, and simple things become effort. Like for example, driving a 4-hour journey. Do you know what I mean? So there's an element like there's an element like I make excuses. I'm like, it's a bit too far. And I think to myself, I tell myself, if I raise my kids to be decent children, really that's all that matters. But at the same time, I think it's a bit of a cop-out to really not hammer home the culture part because, and I wanted to ask, like, from you not finding out till sort of a little bit later on in life, do you feel like, now that you know, do you feel like it made like a massive difference you not knowing? And like a few things. One, when you found out where you was actually from, was you like, oh, you know what, that makes sense because I behaved like this such and such, or was it a case of it didn't actually make a difference in the sense of who I am as a person? So when you found out the information, did it change anything, or was you just like, or did you just help to know?
So I think this is a conversation that I have all the time, and actually it's probably the crux of every kind of hard time I've had, every issue I've had, every problem I think stems down to that in terms of my understanding of who I am.
Right.
And I think there's two parts of that because obviously I've got my own children. So
Absolutely,
again, we're speaking as fathers here, but as an individual, it was the biggest thing missing, biggest thing missing. And the reason I say that is because like I suffered so much racism. Like so much. Like I've got a lot of my black friends that went black schools in Lewisham, whatever, and they're like, yeah, we had colorism and stuff like that, but bro, unless we went out to these sort of white areas, we never even heard nothing. So when we have these conversations, it's like it shocks them because obviously being dark skinned, you would assume, obviously being, light skinned, it wouldn't have been an issue, but when you grow up in like towns and villages and places like this, and literally there's all they see is that you're different, innit? And I think Akala said it once that you have, in order to be white, you have to be 100% white.
Yeah, you can't. There's no.
Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, there is no.
Okay, well look, you're white. No one looked at me as white. Do you know what I mean? No, especially in that area where things are far more heightened. And I think, my mum and dad's, because again, my dad didn't have anything to cling on to, no culture to be proud of or nothing like that. So I struggled to process and deal with the racism because I had no pride in who I was, in my skin color and where I was from. And I think, similarly, why it's for me, it's as being mixed race, it was dodgy territory because my parents, similar to you, thought they were doing the right thing in sense of like bring me up to be respectful and treat everyone the same and the world's, and then as soon as you get hit in the face with some racism, it's like, hang on, but my mum said, my dad was telling me that, so they, again, I don't know whether it was being naive, probably a sign of the times, maybe a little bit of laziness and stuff like that as well. But actually, like, I don't think that they were racially literate. Now there's a lot more understanding around the concept of race and the impact of race, and we speak about it a lot more. So
100%.
The only worry I have is that my experience, I'm then making my kids hypersensitive to race.
Yeah, I know what you mean because there's
like, I mean?
Because there's right now. I mean, this area is like it's a small place, but and like I said, and I think for the most part at the moment. Like my son Franklin, like I said, I don't think there's any part of him that is aware that he's mixed race because, and again, it's a small place, and I just said the times are different now. Mm-hmm. There is an element that where like even if you live in the village, you can kind of be exposed to black culture without leaving your house because of social media and this and that and the other. Whereas way back when, that wasn't really the case, and I think you're right. People weren't really like racially literate, and I think that would have played an impact in their the ignorance. But there's like, and I know what you mean, because sometimes I think to myself, I feel like if like, there's sometimes I think to myself, I'm gonna have to have the conversation with them at one point and be like, yo, bruv, by the way, you're mixed race. There's an element that when you're gonna go somewhere, someone's gonna look at you funny. If you act a certain way, like, this might happen, or if you, because like I say, I always tell him to, like, for the most part, frankly, he's a very nice boy. That's all he is. So sometimes he doesn't understand, like, he needs to stand up for himself a lot of the time. But when I'm giving him this information, I kind of tiptoe around it, because I'm like, if I tell you, listen, if someone puts their hands on you, handle it. There's an element that if he does, there might, because I remember when I was young, when I got in school, if I got into fights, I could see there's an element that the teachers were like, maybe this is the black side in him that's kicking. It would be, if I got angry, it would be, it was something. Do you know what I mean? Whereas 100%. It wasn't just he's upset, because it would be, oh my god, this is Johnny. So there's an element I'm trying to, like, I'm thinking to myself, if I tell him to defend himself, there's an element there might end up being like, they'll make that into, they'll penalize him on that, and the fact that he's this is the angry black person in him. But then at the same time, I think to myself, is it still that way? That maybe me saying something is going to make it, is going to cause a problem I'm very much trying to prevent. Do you know what I mean?
Sure. I think it comes down to the importance of having pride in your history. I think that is the most important thing. I would still bring my children up to, not fight, to be respectful, to deal with things, to in a certain element, stick up for yourself. But if there's that open dialogue where they can come and confide in you about certain issues or the way they've been treated, I think as long as that door's open and they can visit it at some point.
Right.
Now, the problem is that because of my dad's situation, the door was never open.
Yeah, I see.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, he never had a door that kind of led us to East Africa and all of the stuff that were, that's a part of our family history, and was like, look, don't worry about them, because look at what we've got.
Yes, exactly.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, this is part of you, like the X, Y, Z's, and you build up from there. Now that's the funny thing is like, so my youngest brother, we all look different. I'm one of 3 boys. My youngest brother had an afro, was in school. Everyone just was obsessive over his hair, personal space, touching his hair all the time, and and then I spoke to him.
Carpet.
I spoke to him. It's like, I feel so nicely. And the funny thing is that up until my brother was 23 or 22, he went traveling and he was attacked, like racist attack, like badly, put him in hospital.
Well, while he was traveling?
Yeah.
Where, do you know where he was
in New
traveling?
Zealand.
Is it?
Yeah. Jesus. So he won't mind me saying, but like, not a lot of people know that, and he's the sort of person that his upbringing, like, he loves being around here.
Yeah.
He's got loads of white friends. He's knitted into his community. Didn't experience he saw it in a positive light. Everything was in a positive light. So I wonder whether he overlooked microaggressions and all of these little things in school, because someone might take constant touching of hair. I wouldn't like that.
Yeah.
But again, I feel like I'm more literate in terms of what is acceptable, what it's not. You're not getting in no one else's personal space.
Exactly,
like, you're obsessing and making this a thing. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whereas my brother loved it. He loved the attention. So he saw it all in a positive light.
Right.
So again, like, your son might go through life and never really see anything in that light at all. And like you say, then there's that kind of thing of like, are we going to make them aware of it? But for example, so my wife is half Chinese. Okay. So my children are a proper mix. And
so you got a nice little palette going.
Like. Proper palette. But again, in terms of, depending on where they are, they'll get treated in a certain way, whatever it might be. Maybe they'll get the kind of Chinese side of things, the insults from there. Maybe they'll get the stuff, got an Arabic last name,
Right, yeah.
So who knows what they're going to get.
Yeah.
But my daughter, so she's 6, in class, some kid was like, I don't like your skin.
Seriously?
Yeah, I don't like it. You know how the kids do that? Whatever.
I remember one time one kid just said to me, "Why's your nose so big?" Bro, I didn't even know how to answer that.
I know.
All I could say was, "I don't know."
Right? So it's like, how do you take that?
Yeah.
You know, and as a parent, how do you take that?
Yeah.
Do you take that as, they're just kids, you know, don't worry about it. Kids say nasty stuff and then just say to you. And I think that's what my parents did.
Yeah.
You know, but because of what I understand about myself and what I needed, I'm not like that. I'm on the front foot. Like, you know what I mean? I'm on the front foot. My daughter, because of the books we read and because of the conversations we have, put her hand up and said, Miss, so-and-so has been racist to me.
Right, okay.
And they were like, what? So she just called it how it was. Do you know what I mean? Wanted a conversation about it. She was upset as well, obviously.
Of course, yeah.
But had a conversation, and that opened up a bigger conversation. Now, if she would have just taken it on the chin, and we would have taught her to just take it on the chin, these conversations would have never happened.
Absolutely.
So therefore, the kid never gets educated. The schools never.
Yeah, and it's just...
And it just swept under the carpet. Now, the other thing is, when she turns 14, 15, and she's looking on and she's wanting to be like a blue-eyed, blonde-haired princess.
Exactly,
then all of these little incidents are going to play and that she's internalized.
Yeah.
Oh, that boy said this about me when I was that age. He doesn't like... That leads to insecurity. It leads to anxiety. 100%. It leads to a self-hatred, which I'm not willing to risk.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Just for overseeing it. And I don't want that to happen. Now, the battle I have is being mixed race, and your children will have it as well, is like...
Yeah, because that was the one thing when we had our kids. I remember I had a little moment and I'm like, you know what? I don't actually know what it's like to be mixed race. So I don't like, because, you know, I remember I even said this to Aaron before, like, where we lived in Canning Town, it was a weird thing. And this was when I was really young. But I remember one time it was it would have been in like 1998. Like I was literally like 9, 8 years old. I remember there was it was a weird situation where, like, you know, you had white kids left, right, and center calling you, like, yeah, you're black, can't you black this, whatever it was. But I remember distinctively one time, back then, mixed race kids back then in Canning Town, I'm not sure what it was like for everyone else, but back then, the ones in that area would refer to themselves as half white. And it was, and again, when I look back at it now as an adult, I think it was just a case of where we lived. It was... Because people, like, other white kids there were not, they didn't really care about letting you know that they thought you was a black this or black that. Yeah. So I think it's probably more of a survival mechanism that with these particular kids in our neighborhood that were like, or in my school, that were a bit like, you know what, I don't want to get targeted. So if it gets to that point, I'll let me just try and stick on the winning side. And for the most part, again, looking at it as an adult, you come across certain people who are not like, as you said, you're on the front foot. People are a bit more on the back foot. 100%. They're not just they're not willing.
Some people are completely in denial.
Yeah, 100%. And do you know what I mean? And literally, I remember one kid calling me. He's like, "Yeah, you black cunt." And I was like, I remember being mad confused. I was like, but even then, I didn't understand it. But even there was like, I had a gut feeling of that doesn't make sense. But it was, but no, yeah. When we had our kids, I remember thinking to myself, I realized I don't know what it's like to actually be mixed race. I don't know if you're gonna get, and it was an element of like, I can't tell him like the you know, I guess the dark skin experience in a sense, because he might not get that. And I know that when I go to certain places, like people do see that I'm hella darker than they thought that I'm gonna be. There is that sort of, as you said, it's a little microaggression. There's a little sort of thing, which is fine. I mean, for the most part, as an adult, I couldn't really give a shit what people do. So for the most part, I almost don't even notice it anymore. I'm worried, but I don't really let it sort of. It's only superficial, really. But there's an element that I don't know how I'm going to navigate this, because I'm either going to go up here and he's going to think, Dad, you're over there. So, or I'm going to go down. As you said, I might be like, nah, you'll be all right. And like I said, the little things. And like I said, it's one thing with my son, because, you know, he's a boy, but then with my daughter, as you said, you don't want these little things to start building up this sort of this insecurity that then manifests itself later on when, as you said, they're now trying to be something that they're not, which is what sort of what society's, not even society, but just what things that these other little kids have been saying have now got to a point where this self-hatred kind of just seeps in, And then without me realizing, it's part of her now. And now I'd have to end up trying to do damage control. But yeah, just sort of trying to address the bad. You know what? Until you said that your daughter put her hand up and like, yo, I never would have thought to myself that to say to my son or my daughter, listen, if another kid says something about your skin, at the very least, address that to the teacher. You ain't even got to necessarily, because as you said, they are kids, so you can't address that you would as an adult. But it needs to be addressed. That needs to be made clear. Otherwise, as you said, this ignorance just goes on, and the kid never gets educated, and it just sort of it becomes a bigger problem.
I think, like you say, I can only speak from my own experience. We all act from our own experiences and those around us. But I feel like we make sure we have books in the house that reflect that. You know, even my daughter, my youngest daughter is 3. It's like making sure those books are there.
Yeah.
And obviously things have improved in terms of diversity on TV, and, you know, role models and stuff like that are more widely available. You know, it's well worth noting there are so many privileges of being light-skinned as well. Yeah. You know, I think that should not be overlooked at all. There is such a privilege in that. But at the same time, we need to speak contextually, because what we're talking about is living in like small villages and towns that are still to this day predominantly white, almost exclusively white. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So, you know, this conversation to Londoners, it's different because of the context and the understanding of what is it. You know, I remember when a couple of my friends basically never left London unless they're going Nigeria or going back home, going to Ghana or whatever, flying out. Yeah. But in terms of the UK and in these little pockets and countryside, they'd never been out. Yeah. So they come up and visit me. They're like, what? What's happening? What? There's one shop. Like, what, in the whole, in like 15 miles? So, yeah. It's like, what about the buses and stuff like that? Yeah, one a day. Literally,
you got to plan that journey, bro. Yeah.
And they were like, so it's that kind of culture shock and that understanding. Now, I've got friends that kind of, you know, similar to you, I've kind of transcended both. I've had experiences of both. And I've got one of my closest friends, Mitch. He's spent time like out in Swindon. Right. His mum moved him out of London because he was getting in trouble. Right. Then he had all that experience in kind of like upper high school of going through like white areas and all the racism and fighting, and then he was like, I need to get back, and then came back to Lewisham. So you know, we speak on that level of understanding of what it's like. And I think, you know, for me, ultimately, it's your identity has a direct correlation to how comfortable you feel, your happiness and your potential. You know, I think if you don't, at some stage, being mixed race, I think everyone feels like they're not black enough and they're not white enough.
Yes, I can imagine that. And
I also feel like in these areas, definitely at some stage your kids will have some sort of comment, or they'll have some sort of realization at some point that everyone, and like, my dad's black, like, do you know what I mean? Or start to see it as their peers will start to comment on it and see it. And I think that's the important point in which the pride in being black needs to come. Now, like I say, it's however you want to do it, but I think I personally think that your son can never be white.
No,
there is acceptance that he can be black.
Yeah, but there's never gonna be. I think you're so right as well, and I think, and I want to just quickly touch on something. When you said about sort of having that pride about sort of where you're from, where you come from, I think that's where, and I think this is where, I think in my head when until you said it, I didn't really think of it. But I think this is where I'm going wrong when I'm sort of saying to him sort of, when I talk about the race thing and how I'm going to sort of educate my son about that. I think because there's an element that I haven't done enough to teach him about his culture, I'm kind of just teaching him to defend himself for the sake of defending himself, and they're just words. Because the thing is, in one element, I'm saying to him, if someone says, "Oh, I think you're ugly," who cares? But then, and for the most part, there's a word. But then in another element, I'm saying to him, but if someone says this thing, then you need to, and of course for him, they're just words. So he's like, I don't understand what you're telling me to go up here with this, and then almost disregard this other word. And I think if I did really teach him about his culture and his heritage, he'd understand why I'm saying to him, because he'd be like, oh, okay, I get it. And I think you're so right. I think knowing where you're from or having that awareness where you're from and having that pride, this is where that's essentially kind of what you're defending when you're saying, when you kind of speak up to say, yeah, hold on just a second. It's not just the case of, I didn't like the way it's because, of course, it's like when somebody says something about, when someone says a racial thing, or there's someone says something derogatory in regards to the color of your skin or the way you might behave, it's that thing of, when you say that, there's an element that you're attacking my culture, so I'm going to say something back to you to sort of to address that. Not
my family,
you know what I mean?
Yeah,
not just because you hurt my feelings, but it's because there's a bigger picture to what you're saying. And exactly. you need to understand at the very least, because I think for the most part, like I said, kids would just be saying like just saying shit for the sake of it. But yeah, I think you're so right. I think having that pride and having that awareness.
Yeah, and just to tag on to that, one of my friends, one of my good friends now, we've developed. He was my brother's friend actually, and we've developed a relationship like as we've got older, like more mature and had more open conversations.
Yeah.
So Michael, big up Michael.
Yeah.
Again, mixed race. He's from like Ely Way.
Oh, okay.
And really successful guy. Like really, really successful. We had really open conversation quite recently actually. And again, his mum was African, and he said that she would say like, when he was younger, like if he come in crying, she'd be like, you need to stand up straight and walk like a king.
Yeah.
Like you are an African king.
That's strong.
You know, like this is, and there was context there. There was an explanation about the families, the history and everything like that. So he conducted himself like off his mum's back, like with such a strong, like, it was a positive thing that he was black. It was a positive thing that he was African. It was, do you know what I mean? And okay, he was white too, but they weren't sort of trying to, I think she understood maybe some of the battles that she faced when she came to this country, and therefore wanted to kind of give him the tools in order to cope. Now, he might never have had to use them. Yeah. But the fact that they're there just means that, you know, and it's the same for my kids. You know, we make sure every year we go Chinese New Year. Yeah. Like every 2-3 times we're meeting up with all of my wife's Chinese family. And there's an understanding there that obviously their relationship to their grandfather. Yeah. There's that dialogue and everything there. And then on my side as well, the same. So I think it's really important for them to have that, so that, you know, when they're in primary school and someone's, you know, making a real kind of like bantering about Chinese people or doing their eyes or all of that, do you know what I mean? That they're able to then take that personally, and speak up and no, you can't be. And then people in that, oh, I didn't even realize you. Yeah, that's my granddad, and that's my my cousins, and this and this and this. Oh, I didn't know. And then, like you say, then you have a bigger effect on the people around you. And
I think that's true, because I remember when again, at the time I don't think I understood it, but I remember when we moved to Huntingdon, and there was a time when I think it was some girl. I think I had a bit of a running with her younger brother, who's with me and him in the same year, and then I think she must have seen me at lunchtime, and she just shouted, "Oh, you nigger!" And I thought to myself, and the thing is, when she said it, I didn't feel any venom from her. It seemed like as if it seems like as if someone just said to her, listen, if you really want to insult a black person, say this word. But for the most part, I don't even think she was really she was just saying it for the sake of saying it. And I don't think she really understood, like, I think if she did understand, I think if someone had showed her the history, she would have been like, that's a bit strong, I'll just call him a prick. You know what I mean? She would have just gone to that point. That. But I think for the most part, I think you're right. When people are sort of, because I think, especially in certain environments, like, it's almost like, you know, that whole, some people might feel like, you know, doing the Chinese eyes thing is not that much of a big thing. But because they're not being educated and in that community socially is an acceptable thing, maybe because there isn't many Chinese people there. And I think you're right. If you're, you know, if those sort of things do take place and you've educated your kids enough to be like, listen, address this thing, it is going to have a domino effect where these other kids will get educated to a point, because for the most part, I don't think, you know, especially when it comes to kids, it's not really at the point of bad person, good person. They're just children. And it's always lack of understanding and lack of 100%. Education. So I think if you can nip that in the bud from the get-go, because I'm coming across adults, you know, older than me, and they'll say something and I'm like, do you not understand what you said is racist? And you can see they're generally like,
no, I know.
Haven't got a clue. So, and I think, and this is where, don't get me wrong, like I've met some people, I'm like, okay, you're definitely racist, and fair enough, whatever. But then but for the most part, I think, especially in like sort of nowadays, I think it is more of a lack of ignorance and lack of education, and it's just kind of, it's almost become habitual to say these little things,
especially in these areas. Do you know what I mean? And I think the main thing is that, okay, yes, it's about educating other people, but it's also about making sure our own children don't feel isolated. Or don't need to forego their own identity in order to fit in, because that it goes one of two ways, you know. And I watched a TED talk about racial trauma, and they were saying that with racial trauma and any kind of racism that you internalize, you tend to see the patterns go one or two ways. Now, either they go left and they do everything in their power to adopt whiteness. And to fit in with their surroundings and deny that they're mixed race or black or whatever. Or they go the other way and you seek culture. So you hang on. And so like, I went the other way. Like I was like, I had stacks of the Source magazine. I was listening to MTV-based Channel U. Like constantly I was dressing flipping G-Unit clothing. Like everything was over. So because of my own identity crisis and because of the identity that was put on me by, I think, all of the racism that I had, it was like I kind of felt comfort in seeing people on TV and kind of this is me, like. And so then I started to go in my own area. So rather than let it knock me down, you do find like yourself, like you tend to build yourself up and say and sort of stand out a little bit differently, like. And that's led me in, like, you know, I don't drink, I don't go to the pub, I don't do nothing like that. And I think a lot of that comes from the fact that I'm like, I'm not tying into this like Britishness. I'm me. I'm gonna make my own decisions. I'm gonna do this. And so, whilst a lot of the stuff was difficult, I do think it made me who I am now, and it also led me on the journey to discover my dad's family. Because if I had gone left and adopted whiteness, I would have never looked. You see what I mean?
That's true.
I would have never looked. So it's almost like all these things were put in place for me to eventually get to the stage where my soul was yearning to find out and connect the dots, because I could no longer convince myself or anyone around me that my family were, because they weren't even related to me, like my cousins and stuff. My cousins, but genetic, biologically, they're not even my cousins.
No, I know
not even me. And then I look on my mum's side, and they're all white, and it's like it's difficult. And then, like I say, you've got that in your family. Your uncles and that are making the jokes. Your uncles are making
that's the thing, like that. So, you know, that's the thing as well. Like I think, and this is what I mean. I think for you, I guess it seems like as if there's an element like it was always going to go this way, because I think sometimes there's some cases where, you know, you are who you are, like in terms of the type of person you are. As you said, some people go this way, some people go that way, and I think whatever it is, clearly there's something in you that was always going to it was always going to make you better. Like the hurt was always going to make you better and make you stronger. Whereas I don't think that's the case for most people. I think there are some people, you know, there's potentially another Leon out there that wasn't built that way. That they did go. They did sort of just,
100%.
Oh, you know what, fair enough. And I think for some people who aren't, you know, mentally that strong, or just, you know, naturally have that mental sort of toughness, if you are in that environment where you become the butt of the joke, especially on the racial level, and it is around, like I said, you are in a situation where even family members are saying it, like uncles and things like that. I can only imagine how sort of, I think the only way to cope with it would be to just be like, almost become part, blend in,
innit?
Okay, I guess, do you know what I mean? Because 100%. I think too, if you're not strong enough to fight it, and you try to, and you lose, there's you know, like mentally, at least at the very least, your character will be killed. Do you know what I mean? So I think the strength comes in the people around you, though. Yes,
because you can't fight it on your own.
That's true.
You know, like when I went and mentored in secondary schools, And one of the kids, he was like, I saw myself in him,
right.
like little mixed race kid and everything. He was like the butt of the jokes. So whereas I kind of had evolved then, because I dealt with quite a bit of racism at like primary school.
Right.
So I was young.
Yeah.
And that was when it proper hurt me. And then by the time I got secondary school, I was on the front foot.
Yeah.
So stuff would hurt me, but I didn't want to wobble in it. I don't want to get upset. So then I started to become really confrontational, like really outspoken. Like if anyone did anything wrong, I was there. And that was because I just didn't want no one. I was just fighting fire with fire.
Yeah,
do you know
straight
what I
up.
mean?
Yeah.
And I see him, and I think he was just letting it go over his head. So it's like someone make a racist joke to him, he'd just make a joke about their mum, or like as if it was just normal. Yeah. And I was sort of thinking, at some point for that kid, they're going to feel so lost and alone.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
It's just going to dawn on them that, like, everyone else can say this about me, but I can't say this about anyone else.
It's so true, because I think there's... I remember, I'll never forget one time, I must have gone to... I was doing labouring, and I was labouring in Cambridge, and it was like on a big building site, like huge. It was up like on Hills Road, or just off Hills Road. Anyway, big site. And I was there, and I kept hearing, someone saying Django. And I was thinking to myself, and for the most part, I ignored it, because in my head, when they kept saying it, I just kept thinking of the film. And then there was one guy, there's one brother there, he was African, and he's fully adult, like he's at least 40. You can see he's got kids, blah blah blah. And I had spoke to him. I'd been there for about a week, so I'd already spoke to him on lunch break and this and the other. Then I realized, then one of the foremen comes in. And like, Django, can you go put this away over there? Oh, and then I was like, I immediately I said, tell me that's your name, bruv. Tell me that's your actual name on your passport, and these guys aren't calling you Django. And he was like, and I think he might have been from Zimbabwe. And I was like, I said, tell me that. He said, no, that's not my name. And told me some other completely different name. I was like, bruv, are you aware of what's going on? Like, what these like you are the butt of the, and it was like, and again, I think for what it is, he'd never seen Django. He'd never seen the film, but and I think what they did was they capitalized on that. They saw that he was a bit more of a, he's a bit more of a meeker person, a bit more soft spoken. So they thought, you know what, let's let our banter on this guy, and he doesn't, and he's not aware of it. And if anyone wants to say anything, we can just sort of feign ignorance.
No, but the other thing is that they'll also get that person on board. Like, he don't mind.
Bruv, literally.
He don't mind. No, he's not. He's
all
cool
right,
with it. He don't mind. You don't mind, do you? And it just becomes this like gang mentality of like, he's just like a punch bag. He's just a punch bag for people's jokes. And I that for me like is, you smile because it's so unbelievable, like it's so shocking and it's so infuriating. I've seen it so many times.
It was so wild.
Many times.
Like I said, I've been there for. I kept hearing, and the thing is, funny enough, it was me and another mixed race boy that started working there, and he was from Peterborough, and it was only when we heard it, and I said to the guy, I said, "Bro, do you know they call this guy Django?" And there was this moment where we were both like, "What?" And then I think he called over one of the other lads, and he says, "Why are you calling this guy Django?" And the worst thing that happened was this. When we kind of addressed the point that you guys are basically making racist jokes, what happened was something that should have been, you know what, fair enough, we shouldn't be doing that. It now became a thing that as if we were being unreasonable, because of course, this site has been there for about a year and they've been calling him Django for ages. And now all of a sudden, it seemed like, oh, he's having a bit of a bad day. I'm like, nah, but you lot have been crossing the line this whole time. But now that sort of, you have people that are, slightly more sort of, I guess, for lack of a better term, socially aware, because we have seen Django and this guy hasn't. And we're pointing out the fact that you guys have kind of been, call it what it is, taking the piss for this whole time. It now became, like I said, something that should have been a cut and dry thing of, you've had your fun, stop that. It now became, all right, you lot are being a bit, do you know what I mean? It's just a bit much, lads. It was, and I thought to myself, that was the worst thing about it now. And again, I mean, I was only at that site for like another week or so. But it became to a point where I thought to myself, you know what? Now that I've told this guy what it is, he's going to have to make a choice that from now on, because someone's going to say it again. Yeah. He's now going to have to be like, okay, I'm going to have to actually full on go to war for this. And he may even lose his job because if he turns around and goes, stop, They're gonna be the
100%.
management's gonna be like, this guy's violent. He needs to go. So now he has to make a choice of, okay, I have to sort of swallow this and just let it play out, or I confront these people, because for the most part they've and the thing is, it's gonna, for them, it's gonna be like I said, he didn't know, so he's just been like, Now when I told him about what it is, you can see he was like, wait a minute, what? Like, and there's an element that, like, when he does hear that again, I'm sure he did, I don't think he can help but feel angry. But he had to, again, I don't know what he did, but that was the saddest part, that now something that should have just been a basic thing of, look, let's just stop this, now is going to become like a potentially a daily battle for him whilst he's at that site, just to have a basic level of self-respect.
Yeah, literally. It's a horrific story, really, because who should ever be faced with that choice?
Do you know what I mean?
Like, just a level of decency. But there is so many people that would just take that on the chin and think, look, I've got work, I've got my family at home, I can put up with it. It's not, it's not a big deal. I mean, I get to the stage where, like, now it sounds mental to white people, but and it's offensive because my mum finds it offensive and my mum's family, but, like, there's a lot of white spaces I don't like being in. Like, no, I'll be honest. Yeah. I'll be really honest with you. Like, I know that's extreme, but because of, I think, my journey, and when I found myself in, more diverse spaces, I felt comfortable, confident, open, honest, proud, relaxed. Yeah. All of these things. So I have to make a point of taking my kids to London. Right. I have to make a point of meeting up with my friends and their kids and getting in that same environment, so that becomes a part of their journey in this area. So it doesn't become a carbon copy of what I had.
Right, yeah.
So, like, there's a lot of things, like, I cut off a lot of, like, my white friends from school. Yeah. And I think that was only because of I just couldn't deal with the lack of understanding around what I was feeling. Yeah. And I think I ended up despising a lot of them, nice guys, good guys, a lot of them, but a lot of them bystanders. I really struggled with that, and, you ask my wife or anything, over the last 5 to 10 years, the biggest issues that I've had is a lack of community and social integration in this area. So for ages, it was just a case of going to work, trying to build something, for myself, having my family, and that kind of distracted me away from everything. Then eventually, my son's nearly 9, my daughter's nearly 7, my other daughter's 3, so it's like no more babies, no more little ones. It's now getting to the stage where my life isn't all about my kids now. Yeah. And I'm starting to think, damn, like, I've kind of got more time on my hands now, where most people would be filling that in with social. And I just find it hard to kind of just call my black friends. Right. It's healthy for me. I do, like, voice noting and everything that. Yeah. But like I say, I don't really have much of a kind of friendship circle in these areas now.
I can imagine why. It's interesting you say that, because I think my older sister, she had a similar sort of, she had a similar thing, because for the most part with when we moved to Huntingdon, we still had the house in London, and we'd always go back to and from, and it came to a point where mum and dad sort of I think they went back to they moved back into London, and, like, basically they left the house in Huntingdon to us, the kids, and it was basically me, my older sister, my older brother, and my cousin, who's more or less like a brother to me. But anyway, we were all just sort of, living in Huntingdon, cracking on, whatever. And for the most part, I was very lucky, because funnily enough, when I started school, secondary school, like, more black people started coming into Huntingdon. So, and I was fortunate enough that all my close friends just happened to be black. You know what I mean? I got white friends as well, but in terms of my immediate friends, they all just happened to be black. Whether we all became friends because we were all black and we're just together. Do you know what I mean? Who knows? But for the most part, that's what it was. But I think there was a time when my sister was like, and she was just like, I think I'm going to go live in London. And I think she might have felt that. I think with her white friends, I think there's, on some level, whether she articulated it, I think she must have been like, you lot don't get me.
Mm-hmm.
And if I stay here, I'm going to have to put up with this, or I'm going to be fighting you guys all the time.
Yeah,
because,
or like you say, you end up behaving differently.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's so true. Yeah,
behaving differently, speaking a little bit of a different way. Now, I think it's worth clarifying. Like, I don't dislike white people. Like,
no, not at all. No, not
it's
at all,
like that is strictly a social thing because with my work and with like I've got a lot of good relationships with people in my area and white people, and a lot of them are really understanding of stuff. A lot of them are really supportive of me and who I am, and like you say, will always support me in what I do.
Yeah.
So I'm really thankful for that.
Yeah.
But it's just something about the disconnect in cultural interests and
is that
conversation.
Well, is that thing, isn't it? It's if I'm gonna go chill out with my mate, I just want to chill out with my mate. I don't want to feel responsible having to educate you. Do you know what I mean?
This is it.
I should just be able to just come and we'll just hang out. But I don't want to feel like, okay, he's gonna say this and I need to educate him. I'm gonna probably have to do it a couple of times.
Yeah,
because that's not my job.
Do you know what I mean?
Well. Yeah, exactly. Because the thing, if I try to explain something, you don't get it. And this is the thing, like, do you know what I mean? We're not like, especially when you're thinking about just in a social setting of let me just go chill out with my mate. It's not to have to then jump into teacher / psychiatrist / counselor, because do you know what I mean? It's just a difficult thing. It's just, and it's one of the things of, you're either, as my friend, you're either gonna see this and be like, you know what, let me try and understand. And I think, you know what it is? I think the difficult thing is this: when you're black and mixed race and you live in England, there's an element. It's always easy for you to, because you're living in England. And I think this is the same for any sort of immigrant family or migrant family. Mm-hmm. You're aware that when you come there, you're like, okay, I need to kind of get on board. So it's easy for you to kind of. I always used to say that when we moved to Huntingdon, it was always, when I got back home, my parents kind of made a point to let us know that it was like, we're from Kampala in Uganda. They made a point of, in here, when you're at home, we're basically still in Kampala. We're still in Uganda, or even Canning Town. We're still, when you leave outside, yeah, you're in England, but here, we spoke the language. In fact, funnily enough, I think when I moved out of mum and dad's house, and I stopped speaking my language all the time, I think that was when I saw there was a little change, because even that little small thing. Because even now, if I go to one of my family weddings, for about an hour, bruv, I'm dipping in between, and I'm having to go, what's that word again? And it's only after a while then I start speaking it fluently again.
Yeah.
But for the most part, for when some of my when me and my missus got married, and I had some of my aunties and uncles come, it was I was ashamed to even talk, because I was like, I kept going straight to English. I kept thinking, but it takes me a little while to be like, okay, let me speak my language fluently and have a conversation with them so they can understand. And it was like, but it was, it's that thing of like, just that little small thing of, like I said, not when when you're saying, having the people around you, when we stop being around our parents and we're just around, because like I said, us siblings, we just chat to each other anyway. And of course, when I'm out, I'm just talking to my friends, then, as you said, you start behaving slightly differently. It starts to impact you in certain little ways. And I think when you go around your friends, and as you said, it's not a case of that you have anything against white people as a whole. It's just in a social setting, as my friends, I need to just be in a state of mind. We're just here to just chill out.
Yeah, exactly.
I can't be here having to be like, what am I gonna have to educate you on today?
Yeah, and the thing is like, that doesn't even, like, that can't be facilitated by white friends. Like, it's just what it is. It's just a part, and I think that's what people don't understand is like, it's just in me that I feel more comfortable in that situation where I don't feel hyper aware or hypersensitive. Do you know what I mean? And more time they don't even say nothing. Yeah. But it's just a state of being, and I think it's off the back of, for example, I've got a massive issue, like something that I probably need to see a therapist for and work through, but like, I'll walk down the street and like, I'm adamant people are staring at me. Like, adamant. My dad's like it as well.
Yeah.
My mum hates it. You don't know. And my dad's like, no, I know. Like, and I'll like, it will piss me off all day. You know, my wife's like, why do you let it bother? So if there's like a old bald white man and he looks at me like, and that is so ignorant on my part. I understand that, but I think, now why is he looking at me?
Yeah.
Now, to acknowledge that he's looking at me, I must be looking at him.
Exactly. Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? But again, it just, I'm so hypersensitive, and it just takes my mood from just, and I get flustered, I get angry, and it's over nothing. You know, now, do I feel like that when I go back home or when I go to London? No.
Yeah, I can understand.
Do you know what I mean? And do I feel like that when I'm sitting in a pub with my white friends? Yes.
You know what's funny?
This hypersensitive state.
You know what's interesting?
I don't have when I'm in London.
I know what you mean, because I've had it like, there was when my last job, I used to work for Parcel Force, and I'd be delivering blah blah blah, and sometimes I'd get given a route like Wisbech or something like Ely or whatever it is, and it was weird because sometimes, like, I remember I had to go in to deliver to this. It was called. It sounded something like, you know, that the army division, like the French Foreign Legion.
Oh yeah.
It was something Legion Club, something like that.
Yeah.
But I remember reading the name, thinking, I'm not welcome in there. I don't know why, I just felt that. And I remember I'd have this if I went to rural areas, and I had to go into a pub to deliver. I'd feel like it went silent. Sometimes I knew it wasn't silent, but in my head I felt like I've gone in there, and everyone's just. And I had this weird thing where I then, like, in my head, I'd get into this state of mind of, if anyone says anything, defend it. And it was weird because, and again, as you said, I think it's probably something I need to see someone about. But I'd have this thing where I'd go into a pub and I'd get this thing of anxiety where I'm like, I don't know if I'm welcome here. And for the most part, they're probably just looking, thinking, oh, no black people here.
This is
and he's got a parcel. Is it for me? They could just be that. But there's an element I just felt like, I don't know if I'm welcome here. I feel like and immediately I go to, if I lived here, I don't think I could come here and just, like, you know, I don't know, for some Sunday lunch or whatever it is. So I know the feeling you're talking about, because for the most part, like, there's been time where I've gone into, I had to go into, what do you call it? I had to go to, like, when if I've gone to London and I've gone into, like, we've gone into, like, I don't know, I've just nipped into a barbershop or whatever. For the most part, like, especially the one near where we used to live in Canning Town, like, they're small and they're quite crowded places. So you can't really, like, when you go in there, everybody knows you've come in there. So as far as sort of, if you were someone that's going to get a bit nervous around, like, I know that if I went in there with my missus, she'd probably be a bit like, ooh.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Because she probably feels like that. She's like, I don't know if I'm welcome here or not.
Definitely.
And I think, so I can understand, like,
that's like taking, I remember I took one of my friends, it was my birthday.
Yeah.
So it was one of my close friends from around here. He kind of stuck around, white guy, pick up Jack. He was my best man at my wedding. Like, real cool guy. We've been friends for a long time. Someone I respect is so integrated into my life, you know.
Right, yeah.
But he's like one of the only people that kind of survive a cult, you know. And so we went to London and celebrate my birthday with all of my friends from uni and from the acting industry and everything like that. We all come together. And he ended up missing his train home. So his missus is like, where are you going to stay? Like, and he's like, don't worry, I'm staying at Leon's friend's house in Lewisham. So anyway, we went down there, we were driving down, and I remember him like, looking out the windows, like we made a bit of a thing of it. We were all creasing. But he felt uncomfortable. And then the next morning we stayed there, and he's like, what's your mum gonna think and all of this? Anyway, we stayed at his mum's house. His mum went there.
Yeah.
Woke up the next morning, had to catch the train from Lewisham. So we had to walk through the centre of Lewisham.
Right.
So we're walking there, and obviously the atmosphere, everything's different.
It's
so different to being in a village in rural where he lives.
100%, yeah.
So it's, for me, it's like you said, that feeling that they feel then is what I feel.
Exactly.
And it's regardless of where I grew up.
Yeah.
You know, I feel like maybe because of the racism and stuff like that just made me internalize even more discomfort and really, okay, even if people act like it, can I really trust that they're not saying stuff over
that's
the kitchen
that's true.
table?
Yeah, because you just
Do you know what I mean? So I always find that fascinating, you know, that whole conversation around race and then kind of flipping it on its head. But, you know, the two things for me is that sometimes I remember someone asked me, God, it must be like living two different lives. And you must have felt that coming from London and here, is that you just switch between one way of being and the other. It's like, I'm around my friends, I'm in a certain way, and I'm in Streatham or whatever.
Yeah.
And then I come back and I'm going to like my village fete. Do you know what I mean? So it's like, from one time, it's like, you know, you're in Brixton, like there's like yardies shooting dominoes and everything like that, shooting dice even, playing dominoes. And then maybe 6-7 hours later, you jump back on the train and you get back home and there's like, you know, a white lady on stage singing out a tune at a village festival. And it's like, wow. And I remember standing at the entrance, like just, and seeing it. And I just thought, this is, I know
what you mean.
Like, it's literally two different worlds.
You know, I know what you mean, because I never really noticed it until I got a friend called Gibson, and he's consistent all the way. So you know when you go to if you go to like a concert, like let's say you went to a bashment concert or rap concert, whatever it is, and you really like a song. Like if black people really like a song, they might put their lighters up, they might bang on the speakers, and then they'll tell you to reload it. Yeah, they'll tell the DJ to reload it. Yeah, so we must have like I can't remember where we were, like, but it was, I think we must have been, I think we were just walking somewhere. I think someone was just playing some music. I think there were some guy was playing a guitar, just playing a song on guitar. I can't remember where we were walking, but someone was just like busking. And then, like I said, he liked all sorts of music. You know what I mean? He liked, you know, all genres. But he acts the same way to all of them. So this guy's playing his acoustic song. And it, like, as we're talking, he just, Mama keeps regard to him and is like, oh, bruv, reload the song. And the guy was like, on the speaker, literally, bruv, like, and it was only then I realized that I'm like, if we were at like we went to see Buju Banton at Summer Jam not that long ago, you know, and there was like at that festival there was like a tent where they play music. Gibson must have done that about 25 times, and I didn't think nothing of it. Yeah, telling the guy, screaming at the guy, telling him, change it up, like, change it up now, restart the song again. And like the DJ's always well receptive to it as well. Like, do you know what I mean? Cool, yeah, do you know what I mean? But then when he did it in this environment, immediately I was like, bro, what are you doing? Yeah. And that's when I realized, you know what? There's an element, I am living a double life, because for some reason, something that I might even join in one instance, I'm now kind of going, assimilating and being like, oh, okay, let's just. Yeah. Whereas it's him. He doesn't care where he is. He's consistent. Yeah, I respect that all the way through. And I was like, and it's just, it made me. I've thought to myself, as you said, it is kind of living like a double life, because you have these super personas. It's like when you call up for a job and you put that voice on.
Or if you go on the school run, literally,
yeah, you start talking in a way where you don't. Like, that's not you, but you're like 100%. This serves this environment, so that's what I'm gonna put on. But I think again, that is something that sort of, I think when you do live somewhere where you feel like you're not all the way quite welcome, you then do sort of develop this other side of you that you feel like this, you guys will accept this version of me, so I'm gonna give you that.
Exactly, and that is what was so difficult for me, is that I developed that first without anything else. You see what I mean? Yeah. So then when I started to touch into my actual interests in terms of like what I saw on TV, rap music, like all of that stuff, I became obsessed. Like obsessed. So much so that when I went uni, all of my friends were like, oh, you know more about the scene than we do. It was like, yeah, I've kind of, okay. I was like obsessive about stuff, like so obsessive. And like that for me, I didn't have that. And so I didn't switch between the two. Yeah. but I craved some sort of authenticity in the things that I was missing, that I knew that I wanted. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think when I was like a teenager and stuff, I never thought nothing of it. Do you know what I mean? Dressing in all the baggy clothes. I just did it. And then I look back now and I'm like, what a confused kid. Do you know what I mean?
And you're so right, actually, because even it was interesting because when we moved here, when sort of, remember like the new era caps? Like when that, because there was a shop in Peterborough called Venom.
Venom, yeah, I know about Venom. that was the plug,
like. Bruv, like literally, I remember like, and I think I did the same thing as well. As soon as because the funny thing is, people in London didn't do that much. They kind of had their own. But I think when we got wind of some form of black culture, we did the same thing as well. Mm-hmm. I remember wearing these jeans that were way too big for me, bruv. But I was like, I'm fine, because I think subconsciously I was like, I'm in this environment where I'm not familiar with none of these things. Like none of these. There's nothing out here in Huntingdon that I feel like I can connect with at all. That when I then saw a glimpse of something black, that really, because I'm not American.
No, but that was what on TV.
I would latch onto so I was like, let me latch onto that. And you're so right. When I look back now, I'm like, Jesus, there's some confusion there. But I think you're right. I think it was an element of, I think, like I said, I don't think I could articulate as a kid, but I think I would have felt that there's something missing here. Whereas 100%. I remember in London, never felt that. And I never felt, because of course the culture was all around us. It was, do you know what I mean? You had parents, I remember in Canning Town, you had parents disciplining their kids in Iceland the same way how my mum would, you know what I mean? So it was a thing of, there was a whole culture within the community. But when we came here, I remember it was weird. When we were in London and we went shopping and one of us tried to put something in the trolley, my mum would let us know then and don't do that again. Vocally. When one of us did, when we got told off in Tesco's in Huntingdon, I remember even me as a kid getting told off, I was like, "Are you sure you're gonna do that here?" But because I could see everybody was like, because my mum didn't give a shit for the most part. She was like, "What are you doing?" To put it back in our language. And people were like, and even me, I was like, "Are you sure you wanna?" We're not in London right now, but it was a weird thing where even then I was aware that we're not in the same place. We're kind of, this is something new, and I think, and again, give all due to my mum and dad. I think I say mum and dad, my mum, they maintain that. Like my dad would sort of ruled with an iron fist at home. When we went out, he brought it right down. It was a case of which one go home sort of thing. But it was, so I think it is, I think it's a tricky thing, man. I think it's but again, I think that is part of sort of, I guess, being black in a foreign place, or in the UK. I think you kind of have to go through that little journey of sort of trying to sort of figure out who you are and staying that person. Or as you said, if you do just sort of assimilate and be like, oh, okay, I'll just sort of, I'll stay on the bandwagon or whatever it is. Before you, I know you ain't got much time, bruv. Before you want to shoot off, I want to find out a bit more about your show, bruv.
Yeah.
Like, because is it the title, is it Who Are You Really?
But yeah. So the title is, but where are you really from?
That's one. Yeah, where are you really from?
Yeah. So how
did you put it together? Like, is it something?
So it's, I'm from an acting background. Like I said, I got my degree, went into acting, went into the acting industry, did a few TV things for right at the start of my career, and loads of theatre. Like so that was about 5 years, and then left the acting industry in like 2020.
Okay.
Just concentrated on other ventures. Didn't really fit with my family. I had a big family by then that I needed to support. There's loads of reasons why. But obviously I was a creative and I love performing. So I kind of started to write poetry that was kind of spoken word poetry. So it was performative, often to music as well.
Okay.
So it would be a lot of kind of piano based music. So that kind of differentiated it from kind of rap music. So it was a case of, there wasn't, there's not often a drum beat. It's not rhythmic. It's not kind of melodic or kind of repetitive in that sense.
Yeah.
So therefore, if you don't have to write in like 4 or 16 bars to make it sound good, because the music piece is so free that also the poetry and the words can be so free as well. So I started just expressing myself through that, writing about my experience. It's kind of therapy for me. I think it was.
I was going to say, it must be
really good relief for me to kind of put things into words. And then when I started to share it with people were like, damn, like that's quite good. Like you should do something with this. So it weren't long. It was only like 6 months down the line, I started to look for like if there was local things around here, and I thought I'm gonna have to travel like for anything like that. But to be fair, in Huntingdon there was a poetry group, like, and you could turn up and share poetry in it. So I was like, damn. But I got there, it was just all white people, obviously, and most of them were like 60 plus. So, I kind of felt so uncomfortable. Like, but actually, you know, it brought out all my vulnerabilities and taught me a lot. You know, because acting, you're always playing a character.
I was going to say, absolutely.
I think I was constantly running away from myself. In becoming an actor, you know, you get a chance to just be other people all the time.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So someone with an identity crisis that don't really know just gets to go and be loads of other people and explore themselves. So maybe that was part of my journey. But anyway, got to this thing, shared it, and I was so inspired. You know, it's like some of them weren't the most like artistic or anything like that, but people were just willing to share stuff they'd written about stuff that had happened in their lives, whether it was like grief or a transition.
It takes courage, man. I think it takes a lot of courage.
A transition into becoming sober. There was a guy that wrote that, and he just shared it, and I was like, damn, like this is amazing. I shared my thing, and the organizer, there was like a few like published poets and stuff there, and the organizer came up to me and she was like, oh, do you mind if we film it next time? And I was like, oh yeah, sure. She was like, I thought it was amazing. And then I kind of thought like, oh, okay. Like that gave me a bit of confidence.
Yeah.
And then I was speaking to one of my other mixed race friends who grew up around here as well.
Yeah.
And it was like, look, we moan so much about there being a lack of this, a lack of that.
Yeah.
Like, so same for like, oh, there's not really a scene for this.
Yeah.
But at the same time, he was like, why don't we just create it?
Exactly, I was going to say, you know,
same with like, I suppose you doing the podcast and stuff like that. It's like sometimes there's not that much competition. You just have to kind
sort of be the pioneers and just start it.
Be the ones.
100%.
In that sense, we were like, okay, what should we do? And I was like, well, I'm going to put on my own show. And then I spoke to a few different people, and they're kind of like, so what are you going to do? You can have like some musicians there and make it like a big event. I was like, nah, I'm just going to share my own stuff. They were like, well, you think people will want to sit and listen? I was like, I don't care. You know, it's therapy for me.
Yeah, 100%,
you know, it was something like I could perform. I had a catalogue of work that was all to do with my life experiences.
Yeah.
And I could share that with people. You know, and I thought, I don't care if 10 people turn up or 100 people turn up.
Straight up.
I just get to commit to something.
100%.
It's going to mean that I'm held accountable for writing and developing more stuff. And so that's where it was birthed. I was like, cool, I'm going to put it out there. One of my friends who's a photographer come and shot some stuff. Yeah. And again, it's a whole concept was, you know, in the flyer, got an Oman flag, which is where my African family kind of reside now. And their identity is really kind of shuffled and mixed. That's another conversation. But it's like, how do they identify? Some of them are not accepted as Arabs. They're sort of looked at as black. Some of them are looked at as, and a lot of my cousins now, this new generation, they see themselves as Afro-Arabs. So they see themselves
I've never even heard that term.
So that's it. They've kind of coined a new term, and it's something that they're really proud of. And, you know, so this is kind of all of the stuff we've been speaking about is like really central to the show. There's an open mic slot, so for anyone that wants to come and share stuff, I've got a couple of people that are coming from the poetry group to share some stuff, just as like a warm up.
Absolutely.
And then I've got about 10 pieces of poetry with music, and then I'm gonna that will take you through all of the main stuff that I've been through, and identity, racism, all of this stuff, confusion. And then once I've done a piece, I'll drop out of it and we'll have a conversation like this. So audience to people, it's kind of like laid back conversation, and then that will kind of fill in the gaps in terms of getting to the next piece.
Absolutely.
So the whole show will be a kind of journey through.
That'll be decent, man.
So yeah, that's the 19th, Saturday the 19th of August, and it's in St. Ives. It's it's a wedding venue, but they've got like a small little brick barn bit, so it's quite intimate. It should be quite sick in that sense. So yeah, that's that, and it's just
decent,
that's become my creative outlet. It's become my kind of my own counsel, like just to kind of something that will listen to me without giving any opinion back. You know what I mean? Because I realize, and you touched on it so much earlier about becoming a therapist for the people around you. Like, all of my interactions are usually people kind of asking me for advice, or it just gets there in the end. Like giving them advice or whatever. Unless I'm with my friends that I feel like I'm on a level playing field with, and there's an understanding there.
No, I completely understand. I think your show is something that, like, I feel like a show like that, I think there's certain shows and certain things that I think some people need to experience, and I think a show like that, I think there'll be someone out there that needs to 100%. Go to a show like that, because I think 100%. For somebody, I just said sometimes it was on the same wavelength. We just enjoy it for what it is. Mm-hmm. But somebody who hasn't really got a clue, they'll get them and be like, yo,
100%. It's going to make some of them they'll feel uncomfortable, they'll feel targeted, and that's just, you know, I've done it. You know, poetry is such a beautiful medium, you know, to visit these things, and sometimes it gets wrapped up really nicely, but actually the themes and that kind of just hit you in the face. And I'm looking forward to, like, some of my white family coming as well. Do you know what I mean? Because they have a part to play in all of this as well, and a responsibility. And same with friends and people around me, is just getting that understanding and understanding what people might have been through. Now it's funny because whenever I speak about it to someone that I respect, with a family member or whatever, like, it gets played down.
Well, this is what I was going to say.
That happens a lot. It's like, oh, there's people, what about, you've had a good life, like, you've got kids, you know, this and this, and like, it could have been this, it could have been that. And what about people, you know, it's the same as fat shaming, and, you know, and it's like, right, my experience is my experience.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you know what I mean? And I've been playing it down my whole life.
Yeah.
Like, for this phase of my life, I'm relentless with saying, like, I'm not going to do that no more. I can't. Like, I just owe it to myself to be as honest as possible about who I am and what I've been through and where I've kind of arrived.
100%. And I think it's that difference. And I think because you're doing it in this form where it's a show, because there's one thing where if we just having a conversation and you tell me, oh, listen, X, Y, and Z maybe uncomfortable, blah, 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 blah. If I really don't want to face any sort of, if I don't want to take responsibility, or I don't want to face being criticized, I'll just be like, oh, he's having a bit of a rant. So there's an element I can play it off, I can play it down. Mm-hmm. Whereas if I put a show on, I put money into this, I put time into this, you can see that I put effort into this. It's difficult for you to now just downplay it, because at some point that your brain's going to be like, okay, clearly this guy feels a type of way about this that I need to listen. And for him to sort of put himself out, like expose himself like that to that level, then it's an element like I have to listen, and if I don't now, then clearly I've kind of given my answer that, you know, we're not on the same wavelength, that we need to just sort of. So I think it's the fact that you're doing it this way, because I think you know, I've come across people where they'll say things, or you find out that they feel a certain type of way. Like there's one guy I work with who I spoke to, and I think he has a lot to say about some of the people around him. But and I've said to him, you, like, dude, you should come into my podcast and let some of this stuff out, because but he'll never do that. And I think because kind of I've been on my own journey, I can see that it affects him a lot. Yeah. But his family members are clearly just like, and I think because if he ever did say it, they'll kind of be like, nah. And there's an element that it would kind of just, as you said, he just gets downplayed. And I think one of the best places, sort of, most of the time, when someone knows you're like, something really means something to you, is when there's an element of sacrifice. So if I'm willing to sacrifice potentially my self-image, because I might get ridiculed, I might get laughed at, I might get this and that, and I put that on the line to let you know how I feel, there's an element, like I said, you can't really, it's difficult for you to downplay it without making it very clear. You clearly don't care. And that's fine, but let's get that out in the open. So I think I think a show like this, and the fact that, like I said, you started something like this. You know, one thing I like about even since I started this podcast, one of the things I like the most is when you start getting creative, it tends to kind of, the people around you starts bringing out certain things out in them.
100%.
Like my friend Gibson has messaged me about 5 times, telling me, I've got this idea, I've got this idea, that idea. And I think the fact that you're starting this thing, like, even now, bro, I think to myself, I feel like when you wish you all the best that that your show is successful. As you're going on your journey, I'd love for us to like eventually like do like revisit another conversation in
100%.
maybe a year's time.
Absolutely.
And even if like I did a live one, just to find out where
nice.
do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
where your journey has led you to,
yeah,
and have how you sort of where you are at that point, because. Yeah, I think a show like that, I think some things are just needed. And I think it's something like that, especially that kind of space. Because I can only imagine, I mean, there's more mixed race people around this area now.
Yeah, exactly.
So I can only imagine they'll be like, am I going through that? Do you know what I mean? Did I go through that? Do you know what I mean? So I think it's something that's necessary, man.
But that, again, same thing of the platform of talking about these things on a podcast, it's the same thing. And I think there's a bravery in just getting something started. Yes. I've always been someone that's just been unrelenting in that, but probably like if we go full circle back to the time of like where I'm like, nah, I'm not going to be no one's nigger. Like, do you know what I mean? It's like, 100%, you call me that. Like, I remember that was the first experience, year 4. So I must have been like 7, 8.
Yeah.
And that hurt me. And then as I get to it, like a bit more grit, a bit more understand of stuff, and then become like, nah, I'm going to prove you lot wrong. Like, I'm not just turning into someone you could just order around and put me down and rare. I'm going to go and be someone different. I'm not going to sit around like you lot. I'm going to go and do this and do this and do this. And I think that led me to obviously discovering all my family. I had to knock down a lot of doors, over the last 10 years to kind of piece things together. And a lot of the time it looked impossible to find my dad's family, and eventually we did. And a lot of that is visited in the show. I know. And
bro, a lot of people would have been like, I'm even me, but I couldn't sit there and say to you that if I was in the same position, I would have, because I don't even know, like, I think that's a lot, man. I think there's a lot of people that would have been like, I think there's people now who need to do that, but they're like, I'll leave that because it's going to open up too much.
But that's what I'm saying. There's so many risks. Like, there's so many things that could go wrong. But like, I was selfish enough that I just didn't care.
Yeah.
And I remember like, I think it was my mum or maybe even my dad said like, oh, I've read online that when you approach people that you think might be your family, you don't be honest with them straight away. And you should, I'm just like piecing together my family tree. Yeah. I wondered if you had any information. But I was just like, I couldn't waste no time. It's like either you want to know or you don't. Yeah. Like, we're coming for it. I'm going to find you eventually.
Yeah, 100%.
And if I'm kind of going in half-hearted, then how many doors are going to shut in my face? Yes. And then eventually I'm just going to lose motivation or lose the will to do it. And 100%. So I've always been someone that when they have an idea, it's like, well, why not? Like, let's just do it. Let's just do it. Like, what? I'm going to fall on my face. It's not going to work. I'll just do something else.
100%. Yeah, exactly.
So that's 100%. The same with this show. It's like, I'll do the show. Like, if people hate it, well, the show's done. Like, I've already done it. Like, who cares? Do you know what I mean? And because of, I think at the bare minimum, I've shared a couple of pieces with like my dad and people and my brothers that have been on this journey with me. And even my dad's brother, who was obviously a part of his adoptive family, his white brother, who I'm close to. Even he teared up and felt a certain way about it. And I kind of thought, like, there's a lot here, even just for my own family, for my dad, maybe putting some stuff into words for my dad that he can't articulate. Yeah. And just being able to see that done artistically will be worth it for him alone, 100%. Aside from everything else. So I tend to like not think about the bigger picture too much, and actually it does stifle me in business sometimes. I'm learning to set bigger goals, but sometimes, you know what I mean, I've just become very obsessive about committing to something and doing it, and whatever the outcome is. And I think that lends itself to stuff like podcast, because you don't know where it's going to go. You don't know where anything like this can go creatively. You've just got to believe in what you're doing.
Yeah, because I think sometimes, as you said, like, I think it's all right to have an idea of the bigger picture, but sometimes if you focus on that too much, because the thing is, you've got a picture, but that's how you're going to get there is another thing. I think sometimes if you're focusing on the big picture too much, what happens is, like, the steps that come before it, if you think, okay, this is the big picture, I'm going to get here like this, and then it goes that way, you can then start thinking, you start second guessing yourself. Whereas I think sometimes the best thing is to do is, okay, let me look at these steps right in front of me. Let me do that, see how that goes, and then just let it sort of, let it sort of lead me, and eventually hopefully we'll get to this point, because it'll be a case of if I do something and I get a really bad feeling or negative, response, I'll just switch it up a little bit. And then, if I then do something else and I get a good feeling, that will suggest to me that I'm going in the right direction.
Mm-hmm.
So I think sometimes it helps not to have a big picture, especially when you're sort of not quite sure where you want it to go. And it's a case of, let me just see what happens. I think sometimes your best bet is, let me just do this thing in front of me and go from there. And I think as far as so long as you're sort of your what you're saying is genuine, or what you're putting out is 100%. Genuine and it's coming from you, I don't think you can go wrong. I think I'll tell you what, I think the time when you need to really look at the big picture is when whatever you're selling isn't necessarily you. Because then you need to orchestrate that.
Mm-hmm.
You have to orchestrate that because you can't just because at some point who you are is going to come in and it's going to derail the whole thing. 100%. But I think if from the get-go, from the jump, it's all you, I don't think you can go wrong by just sort of, let me just stay genuine and keep going that way. And then hopefully we'll just go from there.
I think this is why I always come back to the fact that I don't work in generalizations. This is just my experience.
100%.
And I know my experience is really unique as well, because there's going to be some people that look at things and say how can you know what it's like to experience racism? Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And then on the flip side, there's other people that say well, you can't wear an England shirt and do this. And do you know what I mean? And it's so this is my experience. I kind of understand it's really unique, but it's again, it's honest, it's genuine, and this is my journey. So
100%, man. Bruv, before you shoot off, I'd love to hear one of your little pieces. Like I said, it ain't got to be long, but just let the people know sort of just I would be give honored. It a sample.
Right, so I had one that I was going to do.
Yeah.
And now I feel like I want to do one that's a little bit more hard hitting.
Absolutely, bro. Absolutely.
All right, cool. This is called 8-Year-Old Me. People tell me I should go to therapy, but I wrote this instead. 8 years old, I got punched in the head and called the N-word. I don't want to say it because I don't want anyone to feel uncomfortable. He called me a nigger. It wasn't my understanding of the word which made me cry, it was the sniggers and laughter that stood by. Do you know what that means? Said an older lad with ginger hair. I had no idea. I just stood there, scared, as the hairs on my arms began to tingle. The first time I had been singled out for something I was yet to consider. This word nigger could be used to make me feel silent, insecure, and alone. Yet these words have been spat out and thrown in my face so many times I can taste the bitterness of these memories. And as time goes by, this pent-up energy turns to me making an enemy out of stares that come from white eyes. So I puffed out my chest and walked with my head held high. And every racist slur that accompanied my teenage years, I just let sit in between my ears, trying to be the bigger man. And whilst I was convinced I could take it on the chin because I'd been here before, that 8-year-old boy was stood there inside me feeling insecure. And every black cunt, monkey and coon I just handed to him. Whilst I laughed, joked and played, he stood there chained to that very space. As this confident and chatty teen grew, the 8-year-old inside me screamed and shouted for attention every time a new slur was mentioned. But it was constant deflection. I didn't want to entertain the feeling of being small, so I let this small being feel nothing at all. Until my presence in the present started to feel distant. So I met with the 8-year-old me and I started to listen. All those years of thick skin started to wear thin, until eventually I realised I'm wearing him.
Rough. Enough said. That's all I gotta say,
Thank you.
Honestly, I felt that, man. You know, it's interesting. And again, I think it's a coping mechanism. I think for the most part, I kind of I put it to the side. But I think the first time I heard a racial slur said to me, I more or less felt there's the exact same outside. On the outside, I was like, yo, what? Mm-hmm. In my head, I'm like, if you see it, I was like, I'm addressing it, blah, blah, blah. But inside, I'm scared, bro. Mm-hmm. I'm like, what is happening? And I'm like, this goes beyond you telling me, I don't know, because as a kid, I was a bit of a chubby kid. This is different for someone saying to me, oh, you fat little whatever. Mm-hmm. It seemed like this is something else. And I was...
Yeah, it just seems like there's so much power in the words. Like it just disables you completely first time.
That line when you just said, after so many years of like thick skin, it's like wearing thin. That's and I tell you what, it's giving me like, I don't know what the perspective is yet, but I think it's giving me an idea of like educating my kid about how to deal with these things, because I think initially my brain, my go-to was going to be like, look, like take it on the chin, address it, but take it on the chin. But I think I need to go a bit deeper than that to sort of really, because like I said, that there's an element that I think for you've come out the other side, but that's not a given for everybody.
No, 100%. And I think I had to have the conversation with my wife as well, because she has to be on the same page. Yeah. She hasn't been through a lot of the stuff that I've been through.
Yeah.
And I think her perception of things is different.
Yeah.
But she was so open to listening to, okay, this might be what we need. And I'm saying like, even little things like around the house, she don't have like having nothing Chinesey in the house or anything Arab like, or anything like African. So I kind of, that needs to be there, even if it's just on the mantelpiece.
Yeah, they need to see it.
I mean, they need to see it. They need to just see it and just know that it's always been in the house, and they might remember that years to come.
Yeah, later on.
I mean, my dad always used to have that in the house. 100%. I do remember that I had a connection with that picture every time, whether it's Uganda or whatever. Like, and I think just taking those steps to do it before it's too late, for me, is the play, because I don't want to do damage limitation, and this may be wrong, it may be right, it may never be needed.
Yeah.
But the point is that when we look deep inside of us, the worst thing would be for our children to feel how we felt, to feel like, I want my son or my daughter to be able to say, he's been racist 100%. To me. They bring it to me. We have a conversation when she gets home. So she came home.
Exactly.
What we did, we went, I got on the laptop. I've got all the photos of when we went to Oman, and it's like, okay, look at the dark skin here, beautiful brown skin like yours, ladies, the hijab, they're this, like so much variety. And she, that's your cousin, that's your auntie, and it was just like, it took her away from this isolated feeling and put her in a kind of bigger. Whereas if you don't have that, or if they don't feel connected to that, it don't mean nothing to them either. They feel isolated from that as well.
Yeah.
So like, there's no point bringing up all that stuff in 5 years' time, and they're just like, well, this is the first time.
Yeah, exactly.
Who is that? That in me. I don't know who that is. Do you know what I mean? So that's why I always try and take my kids to, do you know what I mean? A black cookout, like barbecue.
Yes, 100%.
So that they understand that like life is bigger than your little village.
Exactly.
You know, and you can be connected to all of these things. Now, there might be complexities in that which I haven't thought of, but that's fine. This is for me, feels like a progressive step compared to what I had in that sense. So like I say, if my words and these ignite conversations like this, especially between two people of color, then that's amazing.
100%.
Even better if it ignites a conversation between mixed or interracial couples. I think that is so important, because it needs to happen, and people just avoid it because they think that this world is just this utopian thing where everything's, and the thing is, I want it to be like that. We all want it to be like that, but the stark reality is that, okay, it's not. So what do we do? Do we try and be like actively anti-racist, and do we try and do all of these things?
Yeah.
I think more importantly I think that is so important to help educate others. Yeah. But I think you've got to tend to your own garden first. And I think you've got to make sure you're planting seeds that are diverse, that grow, and that are the seeds that were given to you by the people that came before you.
Exactly.
And that's easy. I think the reason why is like my wife has always said, like, I just don't even, like, I am who I am. Yeah. And she's really comfortable with it and settled. And so it's easy for her just to kind of carry on in this life. Yeah, whereas I was so unsettled that I'm like grabbing for it. We have to do this. We have to celebrate this. We have to. Do you know what I mean? Because 100%. I was so shaky ground that I want to provide a real solid foundation of pride in who we are going forward. And that might be confusing to my kids, because my kids might feel more linked to the Chinese side or more to their white side or whoever. That might change for each of my different children.
Absolutely,
and therefore it's like, that's what I said to my wife, is like, you still have a responsibility to kind of put your family in the picture as much as I can do it. We've got to make sure we keep the Chinese thing linked up and everything like that. And it's the same, at the end of the day, we live in England, like, a lot of my mum always says, yeah, but you don't talk about my family history. And I'm like, yeah, but we're here. Like, it's all we have. Like, every event we have is like every Christmas. Do you know what I mean? It's already here. It's a given. Yeah. And like, there's so many positives to it. Like, I absolutely love my family. Like the jokes, how welcoming they are. Just like, I love my mum's family, but it's that missing piece. That's where I'm at this stage in my life. And then hopefully the next few years will be something that is a lot more wholesome. Yeah. And so again, for your children, you want them to be wholesome. You want them to have that pride in absolutely everything. So, man.
I think like, even just after hearing that little piece there, I think for these rural areas, I think, like I said, now it's places like Huntingdon and St. Neots, they become more and more diverse. I'm seeing, I can see. I remember there was a time in Huntingdon, if I saw a black person, I knew them. 100%. Whereas now, if I go there, but like if I've driven past it on like when secondary school finishes, I see a sea of black kids. I don't know. So I know that it's become more diverse. But I think, like for places that aren't quite there yet in terms of diversity, like when you go a bit further rural, I think what you're doing is necessary. I think there's a lot of people out there who are they're just not aware of it, and I think for the most part, if they're comfortable, they'll just be like, I'm fine. And I think it's just you creating this space. Like I said, I think the good thing with social media now, even if someone doesn't necessarily come to your show, if it's recorded, and they can see it later, they can go, "Whoa, wait a minute." Do you know what I mean? I think if when we were growing up, if there was someone that was doing that where we were, 100%, it would have been such a different place, and such a different experience. You would have been like, "Oh wow!" I think you wouldn't have had to go through that slog of trying to figure it out for yourself. Again, not take it away because it was made you who you are, but at the same time, I think, as I said, not everybody comes through the other side, and I think this it's necessary, man.
And I think just a point to finish on is that I like, if there's anyone listening to this or anyone that kind of feels like, oh, like that's triggered something in me, like reach out. Like, I've always had this thing. I've spoken to Aaron, I've spoken to like all of my people of color, like in my life that are from different places, like all different rural areas. I said, like, I think I said it's you as well. Or Aaron might have said it's you. Like, stick us all in a WhatsApp group. And we need to create our own community of people that don't have access to those things all the time, and we can share, healthy spaces for us to talk about things, to our upbringings, our past, and everything like that. But also just go out, grab some food, and just sit in these spaces. So I think it's important, and everyone's so busy now, but actually, I'm in that place where I understand the importance of connectedness.
Yes,
and to have that. To like-minded people, and we do it in business, right? Business-wise, you want to be around the same sort of people, but also culturally, it's important that I think if there's someone out there that's just kind of thinking, I can't access that, I'm just everyone around me. I've just got white friends, they're going to be people in these smaller areas, towns, 100%. And villages that feel like that. So. Create these spaces and people reach out, follow me, follow you, just have that conversation, and don't be afraid to, like, do you know what I mean?
100%,
don't be afraid to
so
just gotta go for it. It's embarrassing, it's uncomfortable sometimes, it's not beggy at all. It's just one of those things where we crave it too.
Yes. And that's the thing, isn't it? It's I think not everybody has the courage to be like, you know what? I'm scared, but I'm gonna just crack on. Most of the time people will be like, I'm scared, that's it. And I think to be able to hear someone like yourself, to be like, look, to be like basically say, it's all right. There's a lot of us, and to be able to create that space, to be like, this is where you can sort of. I think just knowing that's there will do wonders for the people who are who are just that who do feel like, I don't know, because I think there's some people that haven't even sort of acknowledge that
definitely
they're in that mind state.
Have they looked deep enough?
Do you know what I mean? And I think some people, and again, it's as we say, this is the assumption that you're around all right people. It's a case of if you're on the other side where you're probably around people that aren't necessarily most positive people, is the work becomes even harder because it's one thing I'm trying to figure out where my place is and what I'm doing or how I'm feeling without having to sort of fight this other fight on the other side. But I think, I think, like I just said, I think creating that, I just think like, if you continued in 10 years time, being able to have a point where like, for this not to be a thing anymore in any rural place really, to be able to have that like, and again, for everybody, not just, and it's not to say that, I think some people might feel like, you know, there's an element of rural communities, you know, they are predominantly white, and that is, which is fine because they, you know, there's part of it, there's a culture over there, and it's not so that you want to kind of take your own culture and enforce it on people over there. But I think it's just, if you, because as we said at the start of this, you know, there's an element of safety when you have kids to be in this kind of area, because there's very few dangers, and it's that the factors, because of course with your kids, you're just like, I want you to be safe all the time. So there's an element, there's positives, there's pros that come with living in a rural area, especially when you're parents. But I think it's just, and like I said, so it's not to be a case of you kind of want to sort of change the culture within rural areas, but I think for people of color who do live there, especially kids who are still on that, who are at that point where they're kind of trying to figure out what's going on, or they do have that feeling of, am I welcome here? I think to be able to know that there is a space out there, there is other people, who have felt the exact same way and have come out the other side, will work volumes for their mental state, I think, in the long run. But bruv, I want to thank you so much for your time. Honestly, hope we can do this again.